Uncuckables.
Pleasure to be here. Glad to be part of the team. Are we live?
No.
Yeah, I was looking at the channel.
Hence the
Yeah.
The Uncuckables.
Hello, and we are back for take 2. This is episode 2 of the Uncuckables. I'm Tim Wilms, editor-in-chief of the Unshackled. I'm the host of this new joint live stream here at the Unshackled studio. I'm here with David Hiscox, editor of XYZ.
Pleasure to be here, Tim. Thanks for having me.
And we are also joined for his first full-length appearance on the Uncuckables, James Fox Higgins of The Rational Rise.
Too bloody deadly. How are you guys?
Now, apologies everyone for the false start. Because of the intro, there's a lot of buttons to press, and I made the mistake of muting the microphones on our end in case we spoke during the intro, but then I forgot to unmute it. So for next time, I know never mute our microphones. So
I just enjoyed hearing you swear, Tim.
yeah, well, nobody could hear it though.
I heard it, and they could probably hear me.
And last week we were on the Unshackled channel for the first week, but now we are on the Uncuckables channel. So we've encouraged people to subscribe to that channel. We can't get any super chats tonight because it's under 1,000 subscribers. So make sure that if you are a subscriber to the Unshackled channel or the Rational Rise or Maddie's Modern Life, make sure you come over and subscribe to the Uncuckables channel.
And send us your shekels.
Yes, well, we've got to get up to that 1,000 quota there to get those. Well, they're hard to cash out, we've found.
Yeah, just send the shekels by any means possible. We all have our own donation channels.
A bit of mass immigration into this channel will help us, I'm sure.
It's happening. It's happening.
And we are monitoring the live chat, so we've got our regulars there. Maddie is not here tonight, but he's already being a dick in the chat.
Wouldn't be the same without him.
Yeah.
It's good to have him.
Okay, so let's get on. And enough with this sort of self-reflection. Let's get into...
I thought you were going to say self-flagellation.
Yeah, I was looking for that word. It wasn't...
Yeah.
You know when the word's on your tip of your tongue and you're trying to remember it?
You just got to lick the microphone. That's what I do. Every show when I lose a word, it's usually like just... Then I got it back.
Okay, so the first topic we've got, it's a pretty dull topic, and that is the federal budget 2019. I'm not sure if any of you watched Treasurer Josh Frydenberg get up Tuesday evening to deliver a budget surplus of 7.1 billion, which is it's not one of those wafer thin like 1 billion like a surplus just for the sake of it. It's sort of it's a decent sized one to use a expression.
Well, he's promised a surplus.
Oh yeah, it's
He hasn't
projected.
actually delivered it yet. That's the problem from what I can see. Like they've taken it straight out of the Labor Party book. That's what the Labor Party promised in their last budget. They promised, oh, we're actually going to have a surplus this time, but they got voted out of office.
We really promised this time. It will
Yeah.
really happen.
I've got to say, like the Liberal Party there is a little bit, you can trust them a little bit more when they say we're going to have a surplus. Like they're basically the only party that gives Australia surpluses. So they do have form. But just considering that, like they've still got to get stuff through the Senate, and just considering how things have gone the last 6 years, I'll believe it when I see it. I've got to say.
Or they've been memeing the Liberal team. I know how much the ScoMo loves the memes. They've been doing flashbacks to 1989, the first episode of the Simpsons. Or was it? It was Frydenberg's mullet. That's been big. So last time Labor, I should say, delivered a surplus. So they're certainly trying to go with it.
So the Liberals are actually producing these memes, are they themselves, or?
Yeah, they're the ones that had the Fat Man Scoop one. Do you remember that?
Yeah, right. Well, isn't that edgy and youthful of them?
Their slogan is also back in black, and it reminded me of Amy Winehouse's album Back to Black. And I posted on Facebook, the coalition they're probably going the same way as Amy Winehouse in a few months.
Yeah,
they are committing suicide slowly. Yeah.
So what else did we get from the budget? I would probably watch one of these budget announcement reels if somebody paid me, like a stimulus package of about $900 or something. I'd probably watch one then. But yeah, short of that, I couldn't be asked. So you guys can disseminate it for me.
Well, there's tax relief, so $150 billion in tax cuts.
That is a good thing.
So taxpayers earning up to $126,000 per year will get immediate tax relief. So we're going to be having all taxpayers earning between $45,000 and $200,000 have their tax rate reduced from 32.5% to 30%. And then above,
big pat on the back for that,
200,000,
awesome.
It's 45%. And then below 45,000, it's 19 cents in the dollar.
Well, it'll make some difference, but you got to love how they congratulate themselves that the tax is only 30% for those people. That's when the American Revolution happened over a 3% tax. These guys are congratulating themselves that it's only 30% now instead of 33% or 32%. What clown world we live in.
Taxation is theft. It's
still theft.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Still theft. Yep.
Yeah. Are you aware of the what do you call it, the tax rate scam? How because of inflation, everybody earns more, and so they move up into a increase in the marginal tax bracket. They move up to the next tax bracket, and then the federal government slashes the marginal rates and gives you tax cuts, and you're supposed to thank them for it, saying you reduced our tax burden. Well, just adjusting for inflation.
Yeah.
I can't believe I'm actually standing up for the Liberal Party, but yeah, I remember when Howard and Costello were in power. Costello would regularly slash the tax rate, basically to keep it in line with inflation. So the Liberal Party do at least take care of that. The Labor Party, good luck getting any tax breaks from them. Yeah,
it's still a trick. It's
yes, yes, absolutely. We're basically paying. Well, you could say the same tax, more tax. We know cost of living is going down. Yeah.
I'm going to. Oh no, I don't think I should do this.
I love that the ABC in this one.
Yeah.
Down the bottom, they've actually complained.
Yeah. Do you want me to share the screen?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yep. There we go.
Yeah, they've complained right down the bottom of it. Who is it bad for? Canberrans.
Canberrans, yeah, they're.
Canberrans.
I love that. They haven't really got any special splash of cash. They complain they've only got 30 million for Kings Highway and 20 million for duplication of some drive I haven't heard of. Canberra shouldn't exist for starters. It was basically
flood it.
Flood it. Yeah, it was basically built to stop a war between New South Wales and Victoria. They should. The only good thing about it is that it means that we concentrate our bureaucracy and our perversion in one city. And so it would be easy for, if a foreign power decided to nuke Canberra, I think Australians would be a lot freer. So that's the one good thing I can say about it. So
that's funny because that's exactly what happens in my science fiction novel, The Ghost of Emily.
Are you serious?
Yeah, dead
Canberra
serious,
gets nuked.
Well, not nuked. It gets attacked and virtually destroyed.
Oh wow! And then everybody's happy.
Well, not exactly, but that's for reasons other than the freedom from Canberra.
Because like the place has not gone liberal for over a decade, and it's just getting more and more corrupt. So fantastic. I'm glad the Liberal Party is giving them a hard time. That's awesome.
All right, we've got to get to the juicy stuff now. So Stiff Bastard is saying in the chat that he's got a stiffy for Fraser Anning, and I think a few people in Australia do.
Okay, so we're getting bored by this budget talk.
Oh, fuck the budget. Let's talk about Anning.
Come on, I've been talking about Nick in Canberra. Isn't that interesting?
Okay.
It is. Yeah. Although we do not condone that behaviour or encourage it in any way.
The XYZ does not condone violence.
No, absolutely. Nor does the Rational Rise.
Yeah.
All right, so let's move on to, well, there was Anning was back in the news this week, well, because the Senate was sitting again, and so the Senate got the opportunity to, well, as Anning put it himself, lace him with a wet hanky. So they had their censure motion over his statement that he released post-Christchurch, where he said that this was a result of mass Muslim migration to the West and a form of blowback against Muslim violence over the years.
Yep. Highly offensive. Highly offensive and feeling hurting.
Yeah, I heard that Fraser Anning was very upset.
I saw some great pictures of him just sitting back, it was like a Comedy Central roasting, he was just enjoying it.
Smoking his cigar.
Yeah. No shits to give. And we got some glorious hissy fits out of it from the usual suspects like Sarah Hanson-Young. That was absolutely beautiful snip you shared there, Tim.
Yeah, I loved it. And don't smile at me. You are not us.
You are not us. I love it.
Was that a good shy
and it was the best part
was you just need to be fatter
and way less jolly. The funniest part was that because they're speaking into lectern mics, she couldn't do the mic drop that you can tell she wanted to do at the end, so she just dropped her own ass into the chair. It was so good.
And I also did an article on Penny Wong. She actually got to speak on this subject. She won the McKinnon Political Leadership Prize last Friday, but she was upstaged by Jordan Steele-John, the disabled Green senator, who said that the era of the able-bodied white man is over. And
for him, I suppose.
Penny Wong went in her speech. It didn't get much attention. She said that racism and hate speech were a threat to democracy, and she basically repeated that speech in the Senate during the censure motion, which is, how can you say that? Because democracy is all about making an informed decision about how you want the country to be governed. But if somebody decides certain things are hate speech and can't be heard, how can you make a informed democratic decision?
Well, there's no such thing as hate speech. There's speech.
Yeah.
And that's it. This whole censure motion, the whole concept of, from both sides of politics, we're seeing them try to make a distinction between so-called hate speech and free speech. That is simply about making sure that certain things don't get discussed, and that is mass immigration. That is the identity of Australia as a European nation.
Everything that Fraser Anning is saying could go in the basket of hate speech if they're allowed to define it however they wish to for their political ends.
Yes, and you can rest assured that if they get away with basically saying you are not allowed to say certain things in Parliament, you're not allowed to raise certain subjects and propose certain solutions, that will expand.
Well, the Greens wanted him suspended. Well, they believe that the Parliament should have the power to expel MPs who espouse hate speech, which basically gives other politicians the right of veto over democracy.
At school quadrangle politics, that is. It's she said a nasty thing about me. You're not in our hang anymore. Get out. That's not democracy either. Shut up.
Well, Marine Faruqi, the one of the other Greens senators, and we should also give a shout out to Larissa Waters with the finger she gave out the window to Fraser Anning giving a press conference.
She also gave a finger actually inside.
In the Senate as well.
Yeah, no respect.
So
isn't that hate? That's got to be if hate speech is a thing, giving somebody the finger is probably the most overt expression of hate speech, right? Like, it's clearly you only do it as an act of contempt and hatred for somebody. So that's hate speech, vulgar. Right? Yeah, it's vulgar. It's stupid.
Yeah. Oh, so many Greens, they were all trying to outdo each other.
They're a nasty bunch of commies.
Well, the thing about the left as well is, and like we'll get onto it when we talk about Poogate too. They have always deliberately made public debate vulgar. Like when you look at, say, Poogate, I'm jumping ahead a little bit.
Yeah, that's all good.
It's basically potty humor, which they're using as political commentary. But that's not unusual. Like, they have a history of just using just disgusting things to actually make a political point. Whether you think of the Piss Christ painting,
or Egg Boy. Egg Boy is a vulgarity as well. It is a form of violence, albeit a not very threatening form of violence. But it's still like cracking an egg over somebody is an act of vulgarity. Yeah. It's certainly not political debate. It's certainly not an argument.
Yeah. When you think of Femen, where they strip naked and do all sorts of weird stuff, they literally use their bodily functions. Like there's the weird footage of like an art show, like a modern art show of a woman literally, I think, either pissing in a can or pooing in a can.
Yeah, or menstruating in a can. Yeah. One of those.
Yeah. They've reached the point where bodily functions and genitalia are forms of political expression. So we've reached the point where that is occurring, but to talk about literal traditional values on which civilization has been based for thousands of years, and ideas on which the Australian country was founded is now considered hate speech. It's a complete inversion of morality and of values and of just of how a society operates.
Social justice warriors always project. It's the rule that Vox Day coined, and he's absolutely right that pretty much everything they say you are, they are.
Yeah.
And they just say it louder and in more shrieking tones and in lockstep with their Antifa, terrorist wing to back it up with a bit of violence, gang violence, because they're cowards and they can't do proper violence. But it's just we've got to stop in Australia and in the West in general. We've got to stop acting as though the left give any fucks about the truth or about logic or reason or consistent arguments. They're not playing the same game as us. They're not playing that game, but they pretend to play that game because they know that enough people do care about the truth that if they can convince you through rhetoric and through propaganda that they're the keepers of the truth with their pseudoscience and all their garbage, then they can control the narrative as they do. But people are waking up to it. People are beginning to realize that they don't actually give a damn about the truth. And as soon as we stop trying to argue with them and we start just trying to beat them at their own game, then we'll be able to turn the tide.
Yes.
We got another comment that Dave's mic was a bit quiet. Well, Dave himself is quiet, so
I'll bring it for you.
I think we just need to have Dave's microphone just automatically louder.
Yeah, tech department needs to compensate.
So just need to turn the gain up, overload.
Yeah, that's it. Put the distortion on. A few ways we can go with this. So, in Parliament, they've essentially tried to do what Facebook have done with their community values. They have based their values of what is hate speech on left-wing ideas and said you're not allowed to talk about this. And so that's what Parliament are essentially trying to do. You're not allowed to talk about stopping immigration and making Australia, bringing Australia back to a country based on European people, on European ideas, on European values, European religion. That's out of the bounds.
Well, they're trying to make it out of bounds through the social shaming aspect. But what the censure motion actually is it has no legal ramifications at all. All it potentially has is political fallout. And I was talking to a friend of mine, Vickers, about this earlier today or yesterday, and he explained well that because Senator Anning's comments were written on the Parliament House letterhead, then the traditional correct response from Parliament, if they want to make it clear to the world that those comments don't reflect on our Australian government and on our Parliament houses, is that they need to move a censure motion. So that's what they've done here. And it was, as far as I know, it was unanimous, right? And nobody actually voted against the censure.
There
and
was,
so
except for One Nation and Cory Bernardi.
They abstained, didn't they?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just the cowardly move. That's not a show of support at all, and it's a despicable, cowardly move on their part to abstain. You vote in a censure motion, right? And you either support free speech or you don't. And every single person who voted against that topic being on the table, and they voted against the comments that Anning made, which are, you know, albeit uncomfortable, insensitive, and probably badly timed, they're still true. Right? They're still factually correct. And our entire Senate has now declared that you're not allowed to talk about that. And so, I mean, although it has no legal ramifications for Anning or anyone else, it's a huge red pill for Australia to realize Anning's the only guy in that building who has the balls to talk about this. And we need to talk about it. And we need to get more politicians in the Senate who are going to talk about it as well.
I've got to say, I'm really glad that he actually came out with that statement on the day, because what happens with the media is they set the agenda, they set the narrative from the very first second. And yeah.
Sometimes beforehand.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. They preset it. Like, yeah, I've talked about that too. So he knew, like, he had to get onto it straight away. And what it did was it hijacked the left's narrative. So that's different from saying that he exploited the massacre for political benefit. But he understands.
Well, everyone exploits a tragedy for their own political purposes. What, you think the left didn't exploit Christchurch?
Oh, absolutely.
This is the thing.
But
it's so everyone accuses other people of exploiting a tragedy. Everyone does it. Like, you say that, like, obviously everyone says that, oh, you shouldn't, but everyone does. It's just a fact of, like, politics. Like, let's be realistic.
Okay, yeah. So, yeah, he understands that, like, the left are going to push this, and the longer it takes for people to start questioning this, the further back in the news cycle, like, the original thing is going to be, and the more they're just going to be able to set people's minds to take information in a certain way. So in doing that, like, he made the issue about what he wants to talk about and what ordinary Australians want to talk about.
Can you stop fiddling with the mic, Tim? Just leave his mic alone.
Yeah.
I'm reacting to the comments.
Yeah.
Are you sure they're not just trolling?
Yeah, they're trolling. It's Matty. He's trolling.
Yeah.
He's trolling.
Yeah, Matty always trolls. Don't believe a word he says.
I'm really glad that the censure happened. It's the best thing about the whole thing is that it's forced, as you say, it's actually played into Anning's hands of forcing this particular issue to be on the table for Australia. It's kept it in the news cycle, and it's millions of dollars worth of campaigning money for his new party. That's now registered and going to be on the ballot.
That's Trump tier genius, actually.
It is. Yeah.
For me, the whole Anning phenomenon, it's been more about, for me, free speech, and that we should have discussions without everyone screeching like a banshee and going into hysteria. Like, I have problems with Anning's manifesto, for example. I don't agree with the People's Bank. Like, as a libertarian, I think that having a state bank is a bad idea, but I can object to that rationally, and this is we've seen it time and time again over the past 6 months. People just going off trying to virtue signal and like trying to morally posture and grandstand rather than having a conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hang on.
Hold everything.
What's going on?
Matty was he said he couldn't come tonight, but he.
What, now he wants to get involved?
Now he said your mic is too loud. I think he's trolling now.
Yeah.
Matty, go home.
Well, the Senator Slayer's not in the comments, so I think Matty's trying to compensate.
Yeah.
So there was a speech given by Anning as part of the as a response to the censure, right? And he really, he certainly hasn't backed down on any of the stuff that they're criticizing. He's doubled down, tripled down. And what I really liked about the speech that he gave in Parliament as a response to the censure was that he finally brought, statistics to the table. And he hadn't done that before. He just sort of alluded to, the problem of Islam as though it's obvious and everyone is aware of it. And, anyone who's paying attention is aware of it. But this time he actually backed it up with numbers. And it's like we're in a huge uproar and outrage in the mainstream media and in the West in general about the alt-right and the right wing and the radicalization of the right. And, people like us talking about right-wing things from a right-wing perspective is obviously part of what led the killer to do what he did. And this kind of hysteria. And yet 49 people killed in Christchurch by one nut job with a bunch of guns. And on the other hand, in a very short period of time, I can't remember the statistics off the top of my head, but the ones that Senator Anning laid out show that, hundreds, thousands of people are being killed by Islamic extremists all over the world. It's happening every day. And we know in Australia, particularly in Victoria, we know it's been happening more and more here. Luckily, we've had no major catastrophic massacres or bombings or anything in Australia, but there's been this escalating flow of crazed Islamic individuals shouting Allahu Akbar as they murder people in Australia. And it's happened a number of times. So, we've got to have the conversation.
Yeah, and Australians have been very restrained in the face of this, and this is what really annoys me about you hear Richard Dean Talley said on the Bolt Report, oh, there's Muslim women scared to go out at night. I'm sure if some Muslim women, her hijab was ripped off for real, we would know about it, be plastered all over the news. It doesn't happen. Australians, if they see a woman in hijab or even a burqa, they're not going to rip it off. Australians are not like that. The same with if they see just a young African man on the street. I saw there was a young African questioner on Q&A saying, I get judged. I myself, and I know other people, don't automatically see every young African as a gang member. I mean, if they're just sort of walking casually, you know that they're not posing you any harm. So I really hate.
Everybody gets judged. Every single person gets judged by how they present themselves, the color of their skin, the way they speak, all of these things. People are constantly making shallow judgments of each other every single day. That is not the same as being beaten up in a racial hate crime or being the victim of a terrorist attack. Well, so, we just got to start ignoring all the whinging coming from all directions about it hurts my feelings, it's hate speech, and let's focus on what's actually harming people, what's actually, risking people's lives, what's creating social discord. And, the truth is that right now, Australians are not harassing Muslim people, and we're very accommodating and very welcoming, and at worst we tend to just give a wide berth to people that we're not sure about and we don't trust, and people who feel different to us, and that's it, right? But what Anning is pointing out is that this shooting in New Zealand is indicative of a bigger problem with multiculturalism, and guaranteed, I don't want it to happen, but I know in my bones there are going to be more attacks like this happening. And if anyone's watching this and thinking about doing it, don't fucking do it. Don't do it. Just don't do it. And yet I know that there are still going to be copycats. There's going to be a gradual escalation of retaliatory violence from white, not even right wing, just from white extremists who are seeing the demographic replacement happening in the West and who are desperate to take some kind of action to do it, which is exactly what the Shooters Manifesto laid out. And so this is the problem of the escalation of conflict in multiculturalism, and we've got to have an honest conversation so that it doesn't get to a point where it's commonplace for white people to start harassing Muslim immigrants, because we don't want that. We would love to get along with all the people who share this country with us, But if we're headed in a direction through our immigration policies and through the propaganda that we're faced with every day in the mainstream media, if we're headed in a direction of escalating tension, resentment, and violence, we've got to have the honest conversation about it. And it's just disgusting that our parliamentarians are wanting to close the lid on that instead of open it up.
I would reiterate what you've just said. The one thing that's actually stopped the West from actually descending into literal racial civil war is the restraint of white people. Like, when has there ever been a time when a people in their own country have been attacked by another bunch of people in their own country repeatedly again and again and again? And just the thing that restrains us is our belief in that the system is actually going to solve this issue. What restrains us is our belief that we will have leaders who will actually be prepared to make hard decisions, be prepared to talk about difficult issues and deal with the situation. And so that's, as you were saying as well, that's the problem with what Brenton Tarrant has done. He's lifted the lid on that restraint. I don't know if that lid can be put down again, because like once it happens, that's what we could refer to as the social proof. Yeah. And we've seen people are going to not just see what he did and go, oh, copycat. It's even more than that. They've seen how what he has done has
I've been
literally
censored.
Changed. Oh,
sorry, go on.
What Brenton Tarrant has done has literally changed everything. It is as big a deal as 9/11. It's as big a deal as Pearl Harbor or the sinking of the Lusitania.
Yeah, I honestly think this is our assassination of the Duke Franz Ferdinand event.
I'll just go back
this
to
this century's version of that.
If I can, go back to the budget for a moment.
We got to cool down. We just got to put some ice on
it's on topic. But ASIO and the federal police are set to receive more than $500 million in funding over the next 5 years extra. That was announced actually in Frydenberg's speech. And normally these sort of announcements are kept aren't publicly announced, but it seems that post Christchurch they were wanting to send a message, or we're taking all threats to public safety seriously.
Well, obviously the reason they've had to increase the budget so much is that we've launched the Uncuckables. I'm doing 5 shows a week. Tim's about to launch the Wilms Front. We've got all of these radical right-wing alt media channels, and somebody needs to watch it and listen to every single word we say. Hi, ASIO guys, welcome to the show. We love you. Keep protecting Australia.
Yeah, well, I talk about how they deliberately changed the definition of, first of all, like it was. When they said terrorism, everybody knew it was Islamic terrorism. And so then they've really pushed the line for years and years and years that terror has nothing to do with Islam. And so even though they said that, everybody understood that terror means Islamic terror. So they changed the definition in the Obama years to violent extremism, two adjectives that really it means nothing, but they basically said, okay, this is what we're going to refer to it as now. And now it's just extremism, an adjective. And that's so vague. And we were talking about this ages ago. Like, they're going to turn this around on us. And yes, they've turned it around on us.
Yes, they have.
Yeah, it's well, obviously what you mentioned there. Yeah, we're told that it's just terrorism or radical extremism, but of course, as we've seen, the same thing hasn't been applied post Christchurch, is that all white men are responsible for Brenton Tarrant's actions.
There's no wild ride with you for a white guy. Yeah.
And even though there has all of the, supposed, nationalist leaders have all said what Brenton Tarrant did was totally horrific and not productive, and he's achieved nothing. The same thing doesn't happen after Islamic terror attacks. They sort of say, oh well, he only did this because of of this. There's all these apologists. Remember that Hizbut Tahrir said that even if 1,000 bombs went off, it would only show that Muslims are angry. And a point I feel I should make with you know how after Islamic terror attacks, it's called blowback for foreign policy, but when Fraser Anning says that Christchurch was blowback, he's condemned. There's another double standard there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, totally. I reckon what Anning needs to do next is get up in the Senate and read the jihad-oriented excerpts of the Quran, but change the word infidels to Muslims and just read that out, and then watch the uproar unfold, right? And then let's have a conversation about reciprocity after that.
Let's move on to, because on the day of the censure motion, that's when his party got registered, Fraser Anning's Conservative National Party. Now, I just want to put out there that because he's a sitting senator, he didn't need the 500 members that are required to register a party federally. But the reason it was delayed is because he called it the Conservative Nationals, and Australian Conservatives and the National Party objected. And in the end, they withdrew the abbreviation, so it's just going to appear on the ballot as Fraser Anning's Conservative National Party. It's registered, but I know I was able to tell because membership actually opened up today. You could sign up for membership today, and I know there's a few people sharing their order number because it's done via order number, the way they've set up the website. And I think the last order number that I saw was 664, so they've already got those 500 members. Excellent. Just in one day.
Over the line, yeah. Good stuff. To be honest, it's the only party that I've actually considered joining. I've had people from LDP and the Australian Conservatives encouraging me to join up and get behind those parties, and my attitude's always been, what's the point? What would it do? What's the point in getting behind another small party? And One Nation, I don't know, like there's been no inspiration there for me. But with the announcement of the launch of this party, I'm actually considering joining, because it's like, well, I don't agree with like you said before, there are things in the policies that I don't agree with, but I could influence those if I'm a member. What I do absolutely agree with is the balls with which Anning is trying to force the conversation to happen that needs to happen about multiculturalism, and no one else has been doing it. And I even heard from a source who I won't name, who is well connected with the Australian Conservatives. My friend was saying Fraser Anning's not the guy. You should get behind Cory Bernardi and the Australian Conservatives. And I said, well, but they're not being honest about the problem of multiculturalism. And the answer that my friend gave was, well, they know, they get it. They get the problem, but it wouldn't be politically wise for them to talk about it yet. And I can't stand that kind of cowardice. If it's true, I just don't want to support people who won't speak the truth because it's politically incorrect.
I've talked to insiders who say exactly the same thing. I've been told by a guy who is not Australian but in the Liberal Party, look, I'm the guy who can actually put these things forward because I'm not a white guy, so I've got a little bit of
I think I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, and it's like they say, oh look, we've just got to push it forward incrementally because if we don't, like, we'll just get slammed. But
get slammed. We got to get slammed. Like Anning is getting slammed, and it's working well.
He has changed everything. Anning has changed Australian politics.
Well, Trump had the blueprint, which is never back down, never appease, never be on the defensive, attack. That's what you've got to do. And he got there. He's president now, and he's had
grabbed them by the pussy.
Yeah, modus operandi ever since.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and again, I'm not as interested in the sort of political machinations. I agree with what you're saying, Tim, and in hindsight, it totally worked for Trump. I don't like it as a tactic. I'm interested in, is it true? Is it a true statement? Is it a real problem? Do we need to have this conversation in order to make things better in this country and in the world?
You have to,
and if it's true, regardless of the political fallout of the conversation, it's got to be said. The truth is enough.
But that's the sort of mode of operation you need if you're going to speak about multiculturalism and immigration, because the Overton window, well, it's pretty much just shut at the moment. You can, like, it's bolted shut, and so you've basically got
I'd say it's shattered, actually. I'd say that the window is gone after this NZ shooting. It was clamping down, right? And then the gunman, he totally shattered the window, and now the conversation is happening worldwide in a completely uncontrollable way. And that's why the governments and ASIO and the police are scrambling to try to stifle it and censor it, but they can't. Like, the only way they can do it is to shut down the internet.
I mean, they can't shut down the speech, but I'm talking about the political arena where, like, as we saw with the censure motion, only 2 senators didn't vote in favour of it. That is the political establishment right there. And we've just talked about Australian Conservatives, Liberal Party. They're still in this mode as that it's too... we know what the problem is, but it's too difficult to say the truth, which means that you're going to get nowhere. And that's why you, as I outlined before, you need that Trump mindset.
Yeah, and the only way this political system as it exists now can actually continue, the only way that it will actually be able to continue without the country degenerating into full-scale street war, is if we elect more politicians into the system who are going to speak the truth forthrightly and hang the political fallout. Just speak the damn truth. And Anning is literally the only one.
He's in a tough battle up there in Queensland, because the quota is 14.3%. He's up against Malcolm Roberts from One Nation, is trying to get back in. Obviously, Clive Palmer is running ads every 5 minutes.
The cash.
And he's just saying so many disjointed political messages. One of his ads is saying we should get out of Paris, and then next one he's talking about gender equality. I mean, it's also
in the budget, the government has actually splashed a lot of cash Queensland's way. Strangely enough, I wonder why.
Yeah. I don't think that
very much in full hat.
In the chats here, RW is saying that Pauline Hanson had an appendectomy, appendicectomy. How do you even say that? She had her appendix out, which is a fair excuse. But she said to Koshi that her intent was to abstain from it.
Oh, well, that reminds me, the feel-good story of the week. David Kosh was stuck in an elevator for half an hour and was panicking, and so he had to be rescued by the rest of the Sunrise team.
Oh, if only it had a happy ending.
Half an hour without Koshi, it wasn't enough.
Nah. How did that petition go to get him sacked?
It got over 100,000, because remember, petitions were the thing, because there was the petition to have Anning ousted from Parliament, which Marine Faruqi tabled this week, 1.4 million signatures. I wonder how many were actually Australian. But the Koshi one, have Koshi sacked, got over 100,000, which, Channel 7's not going to sack him, but it's still a good way to virtue signal signing a petition.
I actually have a theory that Koshi is a genius, because he criticised public breastfeeding just off the cuff one time, and basically that sparked a social media campaign of chicks sending in pictures of themselves breastfeeding. So he found a way to get hundreds of women to post their breasts on his social media. Absolute genius. I don't care how much of a cuck soy man he is. Absolute genius.
Definitely a soy man, though, if he's against breastfeeding. But yeah, no, I think the sacking is happening, and it's happening to Channel 7 in general, and it's happening to the mainstream media in general. You look at the comment sections on most of their videos now when they cuck out, and they usually have to shut off the comments pretty quickly, because it's just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Australians going, you guys are fucked. You have no idea what you're talking about.
It's not just the Unshackled and the XYZ, and they can't just write us off as like all those crazy misogynists and conspiracy theorists on the internet. It's all over the mainstream media comment sections. That's the big tell for me.
Yeah, Australia is getting woke, and Anning is the most public and central figure to really start shoving the red pills down people's throats. And it couldn't have come, you know, a moment sooner.
He's
later.
mild too.
I'm glad
so
it's happening.
mild.
Oh yeah, he's chill as.
Yeah, he's just an ordinary bloke who just speaks the truth.
Yeah.
He's painted as the worst thing in the world.
Well,
at the
yeah,
moment.
that is the next Hitler.
Yes,
And I'm not
yes.
just making that up. Somebody called him the next Hitler to me today.
It's so funny because it's like they've obviously never looked into Hitler whatsoever and realized just how incredibly talented Hitler was as a public orator and as somebody who could rally the people to
I'm just surprised
march in
that-
support on. Anning is not anywhere near as charismatic as Hitler.
I'm just
He's not
surprised
even as
that-
charismatic as Trump.
Yeah. I'm just surprised that people still, even it's been used like so many times, you know, literally Hitler. Like it's gotten old, but people are still saying it now.
We should just put it on T-shirts and just wear it everywhere we go. And
What,
just say,
literally
yeah,
Hitler?
yeah, I'm literally Hitler. There, I've called it. Now, fuck off with your false analogies.
Oh,
and
was
let's
that
talk
did you
about-
just do a salute there?
You raised your hands.
I don't give a damn. I don't give a fuck. I really don't anymore. It's like, let's talk about policies, right? Let's not project feelings into people's hearts. Let's talk about individual ideas. Let's talk about what can actually change the direction of the country for the better. And if you want to accuse me of being a racist, you know, anti-Semitic hater, go ahead. I know it's bullshit and I don't need to defend myself against something so ridiculous. And I'll do whatever the fuck I want with my hands.
Now, obviously, we've just spoken about how the Senate took a dump on Fraser Anning. This
Segue.
this episode is called the dump button, and the ABC
Let the
decided
poo jokes
to
begin.
have put to air an actual dump. And you wrote about this, David. Can you describe what's all this about?
So I only discovered that this show, Get Crackin', exists the other day. It's a show. It's a piss take of morning television on the ABC. So it was the very last episode they ever had, and so they found a convenient television excuse to get rid of the two white female hosts and replace them with two black females. And so they proceeded to just like they had all sorts of vulgarity. They showed genitalia on television. On television, they showed like a baby coming through, like actually being birthed and everything like that. And it finished off. Well, I don't know if it finished off, but it featured because they had cushions of with pictures of the white hosts, and the big deal was basically one of the Aboriginal women simulated attempting to poo on the cushion with the face of the white woman. So I was talking about it, like if one of us did that as a skit right now, we would get swatted in 5 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, and I saw the statement that the ABC put out defending it. They basically said, "Oh, people like Carrie Ann Kenley and Sonia Kruger have taken virtual dumps on minorities with their comments."
Well, the thing about that was that
wow.
the ABC
Escalation is happening.
The ABC spokesman said that we wanted to like make a satire of views which are often put out on commercial television. The thing is, that happened twice. Like, that happened twice. Sonia Kruger got hauled up before a commission, and Carrie Ann Kenley, like, there's been a massive blowback. And she didn't have, like, they just, in the Sydney Morning Herald, they described what she said as a diatribe. She had an argument.
Yeah, they were both legitimate points.
Yeah.
I mean, Carrie Ann Kenley was making a point about the virtue signalers about Australia Day. You're actually solving Indigenous disadvantage, and that's where Yumi Steins said racist.
Yes, and interestingly, in one of the monologues of the Aboriginal women on the Get Cracking show, she started making a point about Aboriginal disadvantage. It was exactly the same point that Carrie Ann Kenley made when she was criticising the Australia Day marches. So what it really showed there is like the left try to exploit Aboriginal disadvantage to push communism, and the the right simply look at Aboriginal disadvantage and go, okay, let's solve this with practical measures, and that they decry that as racism. But yeah, the thing about Kerry Ann Kennelly and Sonia Kruger is that it was just so scandalous and amazing that you had actually two people telling the truth for once on mainstream media television. Generally, mainstream media, whether it's film or television, is almost exclusively anti-white. And you had two people saying things that were actually not anti-white for once. And that's why such a big deal has been made about it. That's why there were such big consequences for them. And that's why the ABC has literally done an escalation in the race war and literally... they've done a ritual humiliation where they've literally pooed on the face of white people, on the face of white women.
And let's take stock of that. Let's take real stock of that,
women.
right? You can, now in Australia, right, you can crack an egg over somebody's head, sneak up on them from behind and crack an egg on their head, and that's political debate. That's legitimate political discourse, and, you know, there's no law against that now. The police won't charge you, right? And in fact, the Prime Minister will say that responding to that act of violence should be met with the full force of law, right? We've got that. Now, black people can literally take a dump on white people because they're white people on national television, right? But if we, you know, accidentally raise our hands in a gesture that emulates the European salute of solidarity,
or even blow
we're
kisses
literally
like
Hitler. We're the worst thing ever. We're racist, and we need to be driven out of this country.
It's not the first time ABC alleged comedy has done this. There was, you might recall when Sunrise, they had a segment on should Aboriginal children be removed and placed with white families to protect them from sexual abuse, and they had one of them, I recall, Prue McSween. She's a very sort of high society, liberal, conservative lady. She said, "Well, yeah, this is a no-brainer." And of course, this was outrageous because the Samantha Armitage, she was the host of this segment. She was asking two white people, and so this Indigenous comedy program, Black Comedy, did a segment where they had a all Indigenous panel where they discussed white people's C words, and all the panel agreed, yes, white people are C words.
Yeah. So reciprocity is where we need to come back to here, because what we've reached is in our culture, if you can call it that, is that it's perfectly okay to be explicitly hateful towards white people, but it's not even okay to be implicitly unified as white people, because that's seen as an act of aggression against other people. Why is that? Well, it's obvious. It's because when white people actually get their shit together and begin to see themselves as a people and begin to act with solidarity in the way that every other people does in the world, right, then it causes problems for the parasitic types who can't build their own civilization, right, who can't establish themselves to be independent of white people, and who realize that the teat of welfare and handouts is going to start to run dry when white people have had enough. So the best thing we can do is keep white people atomized, keep them guilty, keep them ashamed of who they are just because they were born, until we can drive them into being a demographic underclass. And all that's going to mean is that everyone is up shit creek economically. All it's going to mean is the civilization is going to fall, and those very people who are acting now to bring about that decline in civilization because they're attacking white people are going to suffer immensely, because, you know, at the end of the day, we'll just pick up the pieces and we'll rebuild, right? But I don't believe that other people can do that in the same way.
You're really getting to the heart of the matter. I was having just that very last point that you make about like what basically happens to the globalists when there are no more white people to milk. I don't think they really care. You think of Keynes as saying that, like, you know, when he was asked, you know, what about what happens in the long term, and he said, well, in the long term we'll all be dead. I think that
they live for this time only, short time horizons.
Yeah, so that's literally the outlook.
And it's anti-civilizational.
Oh, yes.
It's anti-civil, because civilization is about having long time horizons, and this is exactly why white Western civilization is the greatest civilization the world has ever seen. It's exactly because we have a tendency, however, I don't know how it's come to pass. It's happened over a very long period of time, but
It's called cold winters.
the Western mindset, yeah, brought on by cold winters and the adaptation that causes, I think, is a huge part of it. But the Western mindset is to go, well, you know, because it's not just about the winters, because you can still live for your lifetime and survive the winters, right? But we're then thinking about, yeah, but what about my children? And what about my children's children? What about my children's children's children? What about my descendants 1,000 years from now? I would like them to not be doing it so tough as I am. So what can I sacrifice now in order to create something stronger and better so that our people actually progress and evolve and get stronger moving into the future? That's the Western mindset. And you see it in varying degrees in the other great civilizations, right? But in the non-existent civilizations, Aboriginal Australia was not a civilization. You know, it was a bunch of disjointed warring tribes who had short time horizons, and they never even invented the wheel. And maybe they would have if we'd left them alone and never come here long enough. Maybe not. But we're here now. We've got to get along and we've got to work together. But we need to understand that the things that we enjoy in the West are the unique creations of the European peoples.
And I also want to mention some other examples of this sort of anti-white hatred that's been displayed in art or comedy. There was a I think it was a Sydney theatre company. They put on a production with a Aboriginal superhero who is told or possessed by their ancestors to kill the descendants of the white people who killed them. And so it's this thing of intergenerational guilt and culpability. So these white people had nothing to do with supposed atrocities that happened 150, 200 years ago. This Aboriginal superhero is hunting down these white descendants to kill them in a form of justice. And another one is there was these two musicians. They filmed themselves peeing into pistols and then squirting the pistols on statues of James Cook and John Batman.
Here's the thing about this. I talked about this a little while ago, like when the Sonia Kruger thing actually blew up. Conservatives, like as I was talking about before, conservatives look at the practical problems that Aborigines face and say, right, let's find practical solutions to it. The left, they virtue signal and they talk about institutionalized racism, and they have all these symbolic ideas which they say will help the Aborigines feel better about themselves, and then they'll be able to address their disadvantage. The thing is, like, yes, that's a bit silly, but it's also not. When you look at the rising rates of suicide in white people, the rising rates of drug use, shocking rates of abortion and family breakdown in white people, one of the reasons for that is that we are essentially defeated people in our own lands currently. And it's very demoralizing for that to happen. And one of the things that we do on the new right, on the nationalist right, is to reconnect with our sense of who we are, of our identity. It's why on the XYZ I focus on race, because it's like that's like the key red pill that just wakes up everything else. And once you discover that, everything changes.
And you know, it may not be ideal. Like the libertarian mindset is to just reject it and just, you know, go to that radical individualist place.
Well, the
and I respect
that
as an ideal.
It works
but the
well
reality
once you have the foundation set, and once you have secure borders, you can have a good libertarian society within a European society. But you have to get the right. You just have to have the right presets. The thing about Aboriginals, and this is what worries me, is that we're never actually going to be able to address Aboriginal disadvantage until Aboriginals rise up, kill us, and take the country back.
Good luck with that.
Yeah,
Well,
well, that's the problem. Like,
Well, they'll still be disadvantaged by world standards if they.
oh, absolutely. But at least they'd have their national pride, their racial pride back.
Yeah, and they'd have a place, right? And this is
Yeah.
a huge thing for everyone.
And
is
so
that
I think
there must
that's-
be a place. Like they need
Yes.
to have a place.
and that
Aboriginal
and
people should have a place.
I think
It's
that's
theirs.
something that, like, we as conservatives, that we've actually got to get our head around, because, like, as conservatives, this is part of what you were talking about, how, like, we've been trained not to think about this. As conservatives, we've been trained not to think about race because of if we think about race, then it's going to cause another Holocaust. That's literally, like, where it all comes from.
I think
and
that
so-
so you're actually in favour of, like, say in the middle of Australia having a Aboriginal like land just for them.
Possibly, and it might be worth it. It might be better for them if they have to fight for it just a little bit.
I actually don't mind the New Zealand model, which is they had the Treaty of Waitangi in 1854, which was basically, it was an agreement with the white European settlers that you can stay here, but no one else is allowed here. That's basically what it was, and that's why you actually have a lot of Maori nationalists who are against foreigners coming into the country, because to them the treaty was like, yes, white people can come here, and yes, there can be miscegenation between them, and there is quite a bit in New Zealand, but that's it. And that's already taking place in Australia, because if you're 1/16th Aboriginal, that's enough to classify you as an Aboriginal. I think that's fine. And if New Zealand can sort of have that sort of agreement, because yes, this is a colonized land, and so I definitely believe that I would much prefer a coexistence rather than a segregation.
Yeah, I don't believe in forced segregation at all. I like the idea of coexistence, but for the sort of militant racialists of the Aboriginal persuasion or the Maori persuasion, if they want to have a place that's just for them, why not? Like, why not, a territory of some kind? And but the deal would be that they completely govern the area within those borders, and nobody outside gets any say in what happens there. And reciprocally, the same goes the other way. That outside of that, if you want to be part of the Western project, you need to Westernize your thinking, and you need to be a Westerner first and foremost. You need to be an Australian first and foremost. Your Aboriginality is secondary to your allegiance to Australia. You be a nationalist of Australia, and then the race doesn't matter quite so much. But people tend to default to their racial group, and it's not how I'd wish the world to be, but it's how the world is.
It's still a form of appeasement to me that's never going to satisfy these radical racialists, because they're going to say, well,
I don't care if they're satisfied.
Yeah, but their slogan is sovereignty was never ceded. And so, like, say if you gave them like a big part of Central Australia, they say, no, like, this whole nation was ours. You can't just take the vast majority.
We took it. It's conquered land. It's like, let's be honest. It was theirs, and now it's ours. We took it. Every land is conquered land.
That's why I kind of, like, I'm only half joking when I say that it might be good for them if they have to fight for it just a little bit. Like,
conquer some land back.
Yeah.
Totally.
So, yeah. So you expect then, if, like, say they were given a part of Central Australia, that they'd probably try to expand that out?
What I'm saying is, if they were given it, it definitely wouldn't be enough for them, but it wouldn't help them.
Yeah.
The whole argument is that, like,
I don't think it would help them. I mean, we've seen, like, basically white people giving them like welfare and all of these different projects for the past 50 years, and it hasn't helped anything. And
exactly. So what gives us a feeling of self-worth and the ability to actually take control of our lives? It's being able to stand up on your own 2 feet and be independent.
I still believe they can do that with us as part of the Australia project.
That's a contradiction in terms.
So, what is?
for them to be independent with us. Like, obviously, I mean,
we
obviously
don't
there
give
are plenty
anything.
of...
We don't give anything. Like, they're still part of Australia, but like we deal with other welfare dependency. You've got to turn the tap off to force people to be independent and adapt. I mean, it doesn't.
Yeah, but I guess one problem we're having in this conversation here is that we're talking about Aboriginals as an amorphous group, and the truth is it's a huge spectrum of people. There are the militant, social justice Aboriginal types. There are the full blood country Aboriginal types who have very little contact with white people in the modern coastal world. There are the mixed race Aboriginals who are fully integrated Westerners, and they're exactly part of the project that we're part of, and some of them are great defenders of freedom and of these, the British common law values that Australia is built on. So it's a spectrum of people. So what we're saying is, to those who will never be satisfied coexisting with us, then why don't you fight and carve out a part of the country to be yours where you don't have to ever see white people again, if that's what you want?
Does that mean like we could
go for gold?
We could have like Southeast Melbourne just to ourselves.
We'll be lucky to keep Melbourne the way things are going.
Because that, like, would that extend to? Because then you're getting into, well, why can't this group of people in a geographical location be independent as well? We're different. We want to control our...
Well, there is a
that's
historical
right.
precedent. Like, Singapore is basically a Chinese enclave in Southeast Asia.
Now I think we're sort of like, you get what I mean.
I think.
Yeah.
But as soon as we then take that argument back to the principle and then pass it out to everyone and say, okay, so now we need to talk about having a geographical territory that's only for white people. You watch the heads explode as soon as that conversation comes up.
Well, that's how Australia was founded. That was the whole point. And
but we came here and there were Aboriginal people here, and we always knew, like, short of absolute extermination, which hopefully nobody actually wanted, I certainly don't want, and it didn't happen, it was always going to be a project of trying to find a way to coexist with the natives. And that's the same for America with the Native Americans. So, it's not an ethno-state, but, there has been a vast majority of particularly British white people, and then later the other European nations began to settle here. But what we're seeing in just the last 50 years is now the forced integration of, the forced immigration of other, vastly different cultures that are not European, that are not British, some of which don't respect British values and British common law. And so it's getting way harder. It's like, I'd love for Australia to get to a point where we get along with our Aboriginal brothers and sisters. This is their country too. They have an absolute right to be here. And we should try to make it for all of us. But we're getting this melting pot thing out of control.
One of my favorite videos, I've been referring to it quite a lot. It's the video where an ABC journalist is asked, it's in I think the 1960s in Melbourne, and an ABC journalist is asking Melburnians what they think of the White Australia policy. And almost all of them are saying, yes, we should keep the White Australia policy. We should not let foreigners into the country. But so, like, many of them also said, but we just need to find a way to look after our Aborigines. So I don't think there was ever really a problem with having a White Australia policy and finding a way just to work with Aborigines. That was always going to be okay. And I think
and they're a tiny minority, tiny
right.
percentage of the population.
Absolutely. And if we'd kept it to that, we would have been able to find a way to work with them. One of the reasons why so much angst has been caused amongst Aboriginals, and why Aboriginal activism has become so anti-Australian, is because the left have just poisoned it.
Globalist worm tongues whispering in the ears and saying they've been screwing you over since the beginning.
Yeah,
you got to fight. You got to rise up, and poisoning children with this this communist rhetoric. And it's the commies who need the helicopter rides more than anyone. We can talk about race after we get rid of the commies.
That's why I wrote in my article today. I said, like, nobody should watch television, because pretty much everything on television and in movies is designed to actually make white white people and black people hate each other and want to kill each other.
Yeah.
And it's been designed that way by outsiders who think that they're going to benefit from the chaos.
Oh yeah, well, who do benefit, who are benefiting from the chaos, and their teat that they suckle on constantly is the destruction of other nations. You know, by sowing the seeds of discord, and cashing in on the chaos that follows from that.
Anyway, I'm the host. I think I've let you go off on a tangent.
High five, Dave.
But we've got a couple
Fashy
of
high
more
five.
topics. We try to sort of aim by 10 o'clock Australian Eastern Daylight Time. That's sort of a good length, I think, just before an hour and a half. But we are only on YouTube. We made the conscious decision for this just to be a YouTube show, given that Facebook, well, they've come out and said that any promotion of white nationalism and separatism will be banned from the platform. So the discussion we just had would get cut-zucked. That's a new term.
Yeah, let's
I
just
made
take
up.
our business elsewhere, and we need to just encourage everyone to start exiting Facebook. It's time to go, time to pack up shop and move elsewhere. There's other options.
Now, YouTube, they don't exactly ban people, but they've come up with a way of banning but not banning people, and that's with restricting channels. And they've done this to Tommy Robinson. He was banned from Facebook last month. Now they've restricted his channel where you can't search for his videos, you can't find his channel, you can only view his videos if you're sent a direct link. And then you're greeted with a YouTube trigger warning that this might be inappropriate and offensive for you.
You always know that that's where you're going to get the good stuff. Yeah.
And
it's because he's exposing pedophiles? Huh?
Yeah.
What fucking clown world do we live in?
And
Honk.
I've noticed the same thing with Australian Meditations, who he's not watching this show tonight. He's a mad archiver of all the different Australian nationalist videos. I noticed that a lot of the old videos he's put up of Blair Cottrell and Neil Erickson have that trigger warning now if you go into them. And so it seems to be sort of YouTube's way of sort of shuffling people off and
preventing the mass melting of snowflakes everywhere.
Yeah.
We should just deliberately put warnings on it just to take the piss.
Yeah. Like, no, I reckon we need to wear the "I am literally Hitler" shirts. Like, we just need to, everything that they're forcing on us, we need to just accept it and take it and own it and turn it around on them. That's how you win the game of political rhetoric. Is you just don't let them have anything over you. Just take what they give and turn it around and make it your own.
One of your contributors, Ryan Fletcher, he got banned from YouTube, I recall. Oh yeah, you don't want to.
I know you're right. Ryan is just he's got no off button. Yeah, there's no filter. It's why I love his stuff. Like, he just says it so directly. Do you know he's even censored on Minds?
Yeah, he's got a trigger warning
wow.
there.
Yeah. It's what's hilarious is, like, I've got photos. I'll share them at some stage. Like, because there's like on Minds, like you see in your. Basically, it's got something which is kind of blacked out of a photo that Ryan has shared, and it's his dinner. He's on a keto diet at the moment, so Minds is censoring Ryan Fletcher's dinner.
The problem is if YouTube starts restricting people, BitChute and DTube, which are the free speech video platforms, they're blocked by most ISPs in Australia at the moment because they're hosting the Christchurch video. And I know that Gab TV, they're trying to get that up and running. It's one of their side project, which is it's a bit chaotic, the sort of Gab projects. I hope they get that up because it's important that there's a free speech version of everything.
But then they'll block that too.
Well, they haven't blocked Gab yet.
Yeah. My theory is that they will just keep blocking whatever site that we all go to. Like yes, it's important that we all get off Facebook and find other platforms to go to. It'll
get to a point, if it's not checked, it will get to a point where countries that are sliding into socialism and towards communism will do what China has done, which is begin to take full control. I mean, they've already done it by leaning on the ISPs, and they've managed to convince them probably with threats to block all of these, objectionable sites. That will continue. It'll slowly but surely continue to a point where the government completely controls the internet and monitors all internet activity, as it does in China, and then they can completely control the narrative. And this is inevitable. What is going to be absolutely necessary for this conversation to continue to success is physical mobilization of people actually getting together face to face more. We need more meetings. I'm not talking about rising up in a militant revolution. I'm talking about get together, find the people local to you who believe in the same things as you, and start a weekly hangout face to face. We have to do that more and stop hiding behind the internet, because they will take it away from us.
That's why I wrote my April Fool's Day article, because the next step from there is to basically institute anti-association laws, and that's what they'll do. They'll institute that for nationalists too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, the last topic that we've got, and I wrote an article about this, post Christchurch, everybody's tried to pretty much gloss over Islam's shortcomings and its violence and repression. But I've noticed that Islam hasn't taken a break from clashing with its adversaries, and one of them is the LGBT West, because in Birmingham in the UK, it's got 20% Muslim population. They've been Muslim parents have been protesting outside a school there, which is teaching LGBT inclusion education, and protests have been going on for 10 days, and they've had to have crisis meetings at the school, and the local LGBT community are actually like feeling scared. There has been a surge in hate crimes, and it was kind of ironic that when people object to the Safe Schools program here in Australia, they're labelled as bigots and homophobes, and they shouldn't be listened to. But in the UK, these Muslims are protesting a similar program, and it's like, oh, we've got to sort of come to some sort of agreement with them.
The United Cuckdom, they're just cucking hard. That's what's happening, and it may not happen here, but it's certainly sliding that way, and hopefully we can push it back enough that But I guarantee you, it's more than just protests from the Islamic community over there. There would be threats happening to the school boards, and to the individuals would be feeling personally afraid of what might happen if there's an Islamic uprising, because we know what they're capable of when they stand together behind a cause and they get angry enough. And we don't want to think that we're capable of the same, but push hard enough and ignore our genuine problems long enough, and more people are going to just go crazy. And I'd love it to not get there.
And that leads on to the other occurrence that I mentioned in my article, is that Brunei has the nation of Brunei, which is just next to Indonesia and Malaysia. They're going to introduce death by stoning for homosexuality, and which is in line with Sharia law. Yeah. They're just applying Islamic law, and the progressive left, there has been some outrage about it, led by George Clooney. He said that the hotels owned by the Sultan of Brunei should be boycotted. Helen Clark, former Prime Minister of New Zealand, said this is terrible. So did Penny Wong. It's good.
Why does he hate Islam so much?
Yeah, I know, but it's
George Clooney is Islamophobic. George Clooney hates Islam. And he's speaking out against the religion of peace. How can he do this and get away with it? It's outrageous.
And you go.
Once I go, I'm not going to stop.
All right.
Go. Do it.
Let's go watch Sharia. So, the thing about Islam and the gays, it's a great wedge. Just like with Islam and the burqa and women's rights. But one of the things that's made the West weak is that we have given women the vote and freedom, and we have tolerated perversion. one of the reasons why Islam is currently culturally strong is because they understand like what keeps a country strong. Like they have a strong patriarchy, and they take their religions and their identity seriously. And if you stray from that, they punish it very, very severely. We don't need to go to the extent that they do. We don't need to drop people off buildings. But
yeah, they do it in a very sadistic way, which isn't necessary. Yeah,
we don't need to. Basically, the argument that I've often made is that in another 10 to 20 years' time, one way or another, women are not going to have the same freedoms that they have now, and homosexuals are not going to have the same freedoms that they have now, because either a foreign, more virile culture is going to take us over, or we're going to grow some balls again and stand up, basically stand up for like the values of the traditional family values which have kept our civilization going for thousands of years. Progressives like to paint what's happening now as a progression, as an improvement on what's been in the past. But the fact is that it's a cycle, and civilizations in their dying stages, they go through a degenerate cycle. And so we understand this cycle of history, so we can either turn it back or we...
I remember you articulated this in your article. You were glad that as you called it, the Saudi thought was not allowed to settle
so much fun
in Australia.
I'm so proud of that headline.
Yeah, that's classic XYZ. Have a really spurgy headline, but actually have like a good intellectual argument in the article.
I like to
gotta get them clicks.
I self-deprecate by saying like often like the only reason like I do an article is to have the headline. Like I pride myself on having headlines which basically make all the arguments that the article's going to have. But,
it's like the Babylon Bee, but you know, hardcore.
Yeah. So yeah, that's pretty much it. It's basically saying, look, we've actually lost something which was really, really precious.
And you're talking at a civilizational level here,
Absolutely.
you know, like, and what people conflate is this, this desire, and it's not a wrong desire to have, for individual freedom from tyranny and oppression, right?
Yes.
If you're a homosexual person, of course you don't want a fucking jackboot on your throat, and decent people don't want to do that to you either, just because of a sexual preference you have that's likely out of your control, But when you expand that individual freedom out to anything goes, and now anything goes down Oxford Street, and now anything goes anywhere in public schools, and now anything goes throughout the whole of our civilization, you can't expect that complete lack of restriction on perversion, degeneracy, and the lack of self-control that's required to uphold a civilization. Civilization is literally, like, as we talked about earlier, Western civilization is about restraint and self-sacrifice and foregoing your immediate impulses in order to survive the winter and survive 20 generations into the future. And if you just go with every impulse and then you make it the social norm to just go with every impulse and every desire, and then encourage the children and teach them to do that, you can't expect civilization to maintain.
That's right. Libertarianism worked in early America because early Americans were European Christians, and they were European Christians who believed in a higher power, and they believed that if they died with sin in their heart, that they would go to hell and they would be punished for all eternity. And so they self-moderated, and that's how libertarianism works. We can't detach libertarianism from Christianity in that respect. I make the argument with burqas, like I think it's good to encourage women to dress modestly. Like, I know in the short term it'd be bad for guys like us, but the thing about a burqa is it's like, I don't oppose a burqa on the issue of women's rights. The burqas are used by Islam as a way of literally defining territory, of staking a claim on territory. Because like, if you see a few headscarves and a few other funny scarves, like, then you've got
I think a woman should be like elegant, like she should like be able to, but like, for example,
no, but it's about
like,
preventing other men from looking at your woman. It's just a bigger version of one of these, right? This is a territorial claim that my wife has on me and my body.
Like, yeah, I do agree that there is a lot of immodesty these days. For example, it's almost like commonplace now for a woman to display her cleavage in public places like all the time. Like that is,
More than that now.
yeah, yeah. Which is, what
Anyone want to go for a slut walk?
why can't we just go back to where they just had like a normal, normal neckline top on?
Well, yeah, you're right. The thing about a burqa is that it is so obviously foreign from anything that we currently have in the West and even have had in the West, even when women did dress more modestly, that it is clearly a signal that Muslims have a presence in a certain area. And so the more burqas that you see in an area, the more obvious it is that you have a high percentage of Muslims in the area. When you see almost all burqas, it's very, very clear, absolutely crystal clear, that you are in Muslim territory. And so that's why I oppose Islam, because it's the religion of a foreign enemy who've been deliberately imported by another foreign enemy. They're not because like they differ from what is currently defined as Western values of like this libertine culture. It's because they're foreign to us, and if we want to reestablish ourselves as as a country for Europeans, then we've got to...
Maybe you need to design...
Hang on, I want to hear the end of that sentence.
Then we have to basically stand up for our culture, for our religion as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you want to design some sort of Western women's modesty garment?
I'm a terrible designer, don't ask me.
I want to keep going on this Islam LGBT clash because it was brought...
You're desperate to have a fatwa out on you.
Yeah, well, because it was brought to my attention that Qantas, its CEO, Alan Joyce, he was big during the marriage law postal survey of using the Qantas brand to campaign for same-sex marriage. I think he gave over $1 million to the Yes campaign. He's banned Fraser Anning from the exclusive Chairman's Lounge Club. I'm surprised that it's still called the Chairman's Lounge. I mean, wouldn't it be called the Chair People's Lounge, a gender-neutral term? I can't believe that.
Outrageous.
But
disgusting bigotry by Qantas.
Yeah.
There's your next headline for XYZ.
Now bring up the screen share again, because this is Qantas's partners here. Their partner in their frequent flyer program there. Notice who's there. We've got Qatar Airways here. I don't think they think much of gays. And we've also got
Sharia governed country.
Yeah, Emirates, United Arab Emirates. And I also read that they haven't torn up their agreement with Brunei Airways, Royal Brunei Airways. They haven't torn up their agreement there. So
virtue signaling to the max.
Yeah, Alan Joyce, he goes for the easy target, but he still wants that Arab oil money.
I'm brainstorming XYZ headlines as we speak. How about Spirit of Australia, the Flying Jihadi?
Yeah, so I mean, this is the thing about Anning is that he, with the way he has responded to all of these events recently, he has put himself up as the whipping boy for all social justice warriors and virtue signalers, and he's doing it willingly, and it seems to be actually enjoying it, which is quite amazing because most people don't have the balls to do that. But everyone. Basically, I've just been astonished at the number of people, even people who I thought were, right wing or who were fairly honest about the culture war. The amount of people who are publicly disavowing Anning, just over that statement following the shooting, just shows that it's like, okay, everyone is getting really, really scared now to speak the truth and to be honest about what's going on here. And so we need Anning more than ever. And I'm really glad that the party has been registered. And a hilarious timing, too, that it happened on the day of the censure.
It's the thing about the red pill. It's like it lets you predict the future. It's like it elevates you and you can see all the patterns connecting. The thing about SJWs and the left and even conservative cucks is that they're very easy to predict. It's... like when you talk about the manifesto of Brenton Tarrant, like he's predicted blow for blow exactly what would happen. And that's
what's so chilling
mind-blowing.
about the crime,
Yeah.
is that, you know, for me, the thing that made me realize that this was such a significant event in our history moving forward was that there's absolutely no mystery at all about why it happened, or what he intended to achieve, or that he was going to achieve exactly what he set out to politically. I read the manifesto the day after it happened. I'm like, everything he's saying he's hoping will happen is going to happen, and I know it.
And the establishment left and conservacucks have fallen for it. Like they know what's in the manifesto, yet they're doing it anyway. Yeah,
it's almost as though they co-wrote it. You know, like it's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, it's predicted that the election will either be called tomorrow, Saturday, or Sunday, for a Saturday in May, either the 11th, 18th, or 25th. So we're going to be in election campaign. They talk about how Fraser Anning's up for re-election, but they also don't talk about that Larissa Waters, Maureen Faruqi, and Sarah Hanson-Young are all up for re-election, so they could all lose their seats as well. That's never talked about. But the Uncuckables will keep going throughout the election campaign, and we're going to be doing, normally Unshackled does an election night live stream, but we're going to be doing a federal election night uncucked stream, which will be fun.
Yes, yeah, got to do that.
And we've also agreed, we sort of last week we were sort of making plans at the end of the show, but how it's going to work now is that me and David are going to be here every week. The two heavy-hitting editors are going to be here. James, you're going to join us one week, and then Maddie Rose is going to join us the other week.
Yeah, Maddie and I realized we couldn't both be in the same room at the same time. Otherwise, it'll just fall to shit.
You should have him on your show. I'm sure it'd be.
I will. Yeah. No, I love Maddie's work. I like giving him, teasing him, but I love his work.
And we're going to get Australian Meditations on very soon as well. He also needs to go on your show because he's been a long time fan, if I can use that term.
Yeah, he's been tuning in a lot in the chats, which has been great. I've enjoyed his contributions in the chats on my show.
So thanks, James, for joining for your first Uncuckables. I hope you enjoyed it.
My pleasure. Yeah, looking forward to blowing some lids off some lefties and social justice warriors, and having this video instantly demonetized. It's going to be fun.
And thank you, David, again for coming into the studio with me.
Yeah, you're very welcome. It's been a lot of fun.
And thank you to our audience on the Uncuckables YouTube channel. Make sure that you subscribe so you're notified when we go live every Thursday. We tried to do it where we'd create the event in advance, but it just didn't work. So we're going to go live roughly at 8:30 p.m. Next week. It'll be Australian Eastern Standard Time, 8:30 p.m. So we'll aim to go live every Thursday at that time. So we will enjoy your company then. Thank you for watching. Please give it a like and a comment, and we'll see you all again next show.
The Uncuckables.